Hi guys, welcome to week 2. I wanted to take another look. I know we've got some other videos that are on the lesson, but I wanted to give you my 2 cents as well. And I know some of you are newer to Maya, which can be a little bit challenging when you're not only trying to learn rigging, but to learn how Maya works. So anyway, we've got our base skeleton setup. If you want to do the additional roll skeleton setup, that is fabulous. Please do so. If you're struggling to understand the rigging, then we can simplify. All you need are where the main bends are. So the hip, knee, ankle, ball and toe of the foot, the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and then all of the finger joints. In my example here, I just have one for the hand, but yours should have fingers as well. Make sure that your core, or the utmost parent of your skeletal system, is right in the center here, and then I would put a minimum of 2 for the spine. If you don't have any there, then you won't be able to bend the back. If you go crazy and have like 5 of them, you get some really awkward bend when you don't bend them the same amount. So I always say, if you want to just take a look, you've set up the skeleton, obviously it's not attached, but do a bend and see if you can kind of create a nice roundness. All right. So don't forget, when dealing with your skeleton, try to do it always in an orthographic view so that you know it's straight on and straight set up. You'll see that some models are more centered, more even, more straightforward than others, so that's also a little bit of a learning curve. If you want to toggle between viewports, you can always hit spacebar and go that way, or we can go to panels and change the viewport that way. All right, so now I want to talk about layers. Layers are here under your channel box. You can hit the attribute editor we commonly use with modeling, channel box. We're going to kind of focus in with rigging. They both do the same things, just displayed a little bit differently. So most of the time here, when you are rigging, it gets complicated because if I were to click and drag to try to select something, sometimes I'll get my mesh, sometimes I'll get the joint. Things get in the way and it's hard to kind of focus. So you want to click on your mesh, go to Layers, and create Layer from Selected. I can double click on the name here and I can call it Mesh, hit Save. Now the fabulous thing here, we can see I have a V for visible. If I click on that, it hides it. Or in this third box that's empty, I can go to T for transparent or R for reference. Both I cannot grab the mesh. I'm only able to grab what's underneath. Okay? So you can leave this however you want. Then I will grab the core of my skeleton and I can do layers, create layer from selected, and I can do the same skeleton. So we're going to make a new layer for your IK handles once those are created, but this is kind of important just in general. I do this a lot of time no matter what I'm doing, if you're modeling, rigging, just to keep things organized. If you do have a lot in your scene too, it becomes pretty complicated and it can slow your system down. So if you put things in layers, and you can hide them temporarily when you're not working on them. All right, so we've got our skeleton set up here. I'm going to take a look at the arm for this example, but we have what's called IK and FK, forward kinematics and inverse kinematics. So forward kinematics means that the parent controls the child. So for example, if I grab my shoulder joint here, if I rotate that, all of the children, everything below, follow with it. If you're a little confused on what a parent-child relationship is, it has to do with how you set it up. So where you clicked first when you were creating that joint chain, that's your parent, then the child, and so forth. Think of a child just like a standard child. Let's say you're crossing the street and you grab the child's hand and make the child cross the street with you. You are the parent, you are making the child move. But as you're crossing the street, the child can still wave, move around, do whatever. They're following your movement, but they can still do their own. So just because, my arm has gone up this way doesn't mean my child can't also move in their own direction. Okay? So, forward kinematics are often used with arms because think about walking. If you start the movement with your wrist or your shoulder, just sitting in your seat right now, if you let your arms kind of go limp and in front of you and start moving your shoulders, you can see that you can get your arms to sway. Now, your feet, for example, those are generally inverse kinematics, which means the child affects the parent. Most of the time, with your feet, to walk, you are picking up your foot, moving it forward, and dropping it. Technically, walking is kind of catching yourself from falling, so think of yourself picking up the foot and placing it down. It would be kind of weird if we had to swing our hip, then bend our knee to get our walk to happen. That being said, we can use forward kinematics on the legs, and there are a lot of occasions that we want to use inverse on our arms. So we want to get these set up so that we can use inverse kinematics, because right now, without any handles, it is all forward kinematics. That's just the way that it's been set up. The parent controls the child. Again, if I were to grab my cord joint, I can move the whole thing as one. If I grab my little toe here, I'm only moving the toe. That is the utmost child in that relationship. So we've given bend to our arms. That was part of your week 1 assignment, and to your legs. Kind of depends on your model here, but you want to try to get it so it's centered in your mesh. That being said, it does not have to be centered in your mesh at all. You could have this joint out to the side. It wouldn't really make sense for you to because we are visually looking at something incorrectly, but once we do the weighting, it won't matter where the joint is. So if you're kind of nitpicking trying to get it perfect, you don't have to because we're going to tell it what part of the mesh to affect later in this class. The one thing that is important is kind of setting up the angle that you want this to rotate. So for example, if you actually click on the word rotate Y and then middle mouse click and drag, you can move it in the viewport. So I want this to be able to bend forward. So we can move it to a forward position, right mouse click and hold on it, and go to set preferred angle. That's kind of telling Maya this is the way we want it to go. And then going back into your channel box, hitting 0 to move it back. You don't want to rotate it back because you just set the angle, so you can just click 0 to get it back to where it was. Now we can add the IK handle. So you're going to go to skeleton, create IK handle. You want to click on the shoulder and then the wrist. By default, it says IK handle 1. You can just double click on that. And we've got right arm IK. And now you can see I'm going to click off that. It's going to create this line here. Let me just hide our mesh for a second. It's going to create this line right here and little kind of handles down here that create our IK handle. All right. Now, if we look in our attribute editor, we can look over into our right arm IK, and we can see some of the attributes that are also in. If you go to skeleton, create IK handle, and if you hit the option box first, you can see we have some of these as a selection. All of those are going to also be in our attribute editor, so if you wanted to change anything after the fact, they're all right here. You are going to want rotate plane solver. The other video goes over that a little bit further, but because we are rotating around. All right, so now to control the arm, I'll look in our perspective view. I'll bring back my attribute editor and turn this on. You can also hit Control A to toggle between your attribute editor in your channel box. But I'm going to use that to move my arm. So instead of having to use the shoulder, I can grab my IK handle and move everything with it. And now because we had selected which way we want it to bend, you can see our arm bends. If you pull the IK handle too far, you'll notice nothing really happens. It just reaches its limit and stays straight. But that's why we want to leave that bend that we had first placed in there. Okay? So you'll want to do that to both sides and then to the leg. So, we work to give bend to the leg here, and then you can set your preferred angle. I'll do create IK handle. I'll grab the hip and then the ankle. You'll notice if you were to do it to the toe, it's going to act really strange. So if I do create IK handle and I do the hip to the toe, it's very unnatural. Your foot gets kind of bent in weird ways. So make sure you're doing from the hip to the toe. So create IK handle, hip, click and let go, ankle, click and let go, and now you can see we can pick up our foot, and our foot falls naturally from the ankle. So we're getting that same idea. We can call this right leg IK. Then once you have all of your IK handles, you're going to want to select them. You can hold Shift to select all 4 of them. And we're going to go to Layer, Create Layer from Selected. And now you've got your 3 layers set up, and your limits, and your IK handles. And that is what I am looking for this week. So let me know if you have any questions. Have a good week.